Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and I'm the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to How to Write a Winning Med School Personal Statement, be presented by Accepted consultant Lolita Wood Hill. Lolita has decades of experience in pre-health advising and medical school admissions, having served as a pre-health advisor for over 25 years. She is the former director of 2 post-bac programs at CUNY and currently serves as the executive director of pre-health advising at Yeshiva College in New York. Over the last 8 years, her pre-med students at Yeshiva College have had an 88% acceptance rate. In addition to this webinar and regular presentations at Yeshiva College, she has also presented workshops for regional and national associations of health and healthcare admissions advisors. Now, before we start, and before I turn this over to Lolita, I'd like to bring a few items to your attention. Lolita may ask a question during the presentation and ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon. If you are, and I'm going to test your skill with hand icons. I tested a little bit before, but we're going to do it again. If you are here because you want to write a winning personal statement that helps you get accepted to medical school and pursue the career of your dreams, please raise your hand. Okay, most of you are here for the right reasons and know how to use the hand raising feature in Zoom after probably endless Zoom classes, etc. All right. Point 2, raising hands allows you to respond to our questions. But what about your questions? We have allotted time at the end of Lolita's presentation for questions, and she will answer them then. However, you can post your questions at any time in the question window. If Lolita asks an open-ended question in the course of the presentation, please post your answers in the chat window. So again, use the question window for your questions and the chat window for your answers to our questions. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We really do value your feedback. We also always like to learn a little bit about our audience before we dive into the webinar. So I have a couple of questions for you right now, and they're actually in the form of polls. So here we go. Where are you at in the application process? Are you a first-time applicant, a reapplicant for this cycle, or planning ahead to apply in 2021 or later? Okay, we're at 75%. Let's get it over 80. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the polling with 81% having voted rather. Here are the results. First-time applicant for this cycle, 69%, reapplicant for this cycle, 15%, and planning ahead to apply for next cycle. Great, 15%. Okay, I expected most to be for this cycle, and that's pretty much what we have, but welcome to those of you planning ahead. That's great. And then the second poll is, are you applying for MD, DO, or both? Are you applying MD, DO, or both? And again, we're 81, more than 87%. Great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. 57% are applying MD only. Nobody is applying DO only, and 43% are applying to both MD and DO programs. Okay, great. And then the last question is, last poll is, have you started your personal statement yet? Yes, I've begun writing. I've made some notes, or no, not at all. We're going to help all of you, but just curious where you're at. And again, with 87% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we're at 93%. We have a great audience here today. 33%, yes, I've begun writing. 40%, I've made some note, and 27% have not started at all. Okay, I didn't share those results. Let me do that now. Okay, so there you have it. That's where you're all at. Enough of the preliminaries. Without further ado, Lolita Wood Hill and how to write a winning med school personal statement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you. Let's start with the first question. I'm here, and as you can see, there's a picture of 5 very stately looking people. These are your readers. These are the people who are going to be the audience that's going to review your personal statement. And when you write your personal statement, you have to keep this audience in mind, okay? The audience is usually someone who's over 40, someone who's probably been doing these types of readings for a very long time. So they're people that are not your age. So you have to keep in mind that your audience is someone that's probably closer to your parents, or if you're very young or your parents are very young, maybe closer to your grandparents' age. So your job is to make sure that they see your story, but that you also keep in mind that your story has to be told in the context of how they would understand it, not how your frat brother might see it or how your two roommates might see it, but in the context of someone who has a lot of expertise in this area and whose value system may be markedly different than yours. So I want you to keep that in mind, okay? What's their job? Well, their job is to make decisions about whether or not you get an interview or not. And in order to make that decision, they have to see a personal statement that really resonates and says something to them about you. One of the first things you want to do is make sure that you are thinking about the school, thinking about mission statements, vision statements for the various schools. If you're applying MD and DO, then you really want to make sure that you understand what the similarities and what the differences are in terms of how MDs and DOs approach the practice of medicine, because that should also fuel how you write your statement, okay? Do you add something to their class? Are you able to capture your unique personality? Okay. Are you a good fit? What distinguishes you from someone else? It doesn't have to be that you're the 4.0. It doesn't have to be that you have the 99th percent MCAT score. They want to know what else makes you up as a person. What makes you different? As you can see here, we have someone who's a fencer. We have someone who's a twirler, a bike rider, obviously someone who speaks multiple languages, an EMT. So your personal passions and your personality should be something that comes out in this personal statement. What do they need to know? They need to know who you are. They want to know not only what you do to bring that makes you different yourself, but how will you bring that difference in you to the school and make up a mosaic that gives them a very diversified class. And when I say diversified, I don't mean that you have to be someone who's a different race or a different color or a different culture, that you have a different religion, but that you bring something different to the table that's unique to you. And how does that fit into where they think they want their class to be? I have a student who was interviewed because he rode a unicycle. The dean just thought that was really an incredible thing to do. So that student got an interview. These are the kinds of things that you want to highlight. So don't feel as if the things that you do that you enjoy are things that you can't talk about, because that's exactly what schools want to see. They want to see every part of you, okay? What's the purpose of your writing? Okay, the purpose is to show that you are more than your MCAT, your DAT, because we might have some pre-dental students here, I'm not sure. And you're more than your test scores and your GPA. Okay, you are someone that they would like to know, that they would feel comfortable educating. They feel that you will get along with your classmates, and eventually that they would like to know that they could call you a colleague. They want to see what you value. Have you demonstrated teamwork, leadership, empathy? Do you like to teach, tutoring? Do you like to work with your hands? Or do you have an affinity for really making connections between yourself and other people, bringing people together who might otherwise be strangers? And you want to show them that. You don't want to just tell them that. You have to show them how that happens. Okay? How how do you fulfill this? How do you make that happen? What are the kinds of things that you want to bring together so they can see all of who you are? Well, you want to talk about your skills, obviously. Skills are important. You can't go to medical school without having a certain set of skills. You also want to show them your interest. Are you interested in climate change? Do you have something that interests you about public health? And what opportunities have you taken advantage of? Have you traveled abroad? Or do you go outside your comfort zone and look for opportunities to just meet new people and have new experiences? Maybe you're a rock climber. These are the kinds of things that the schools want to see, because they want to know ultimately that your ability to be a physician is going to include all of these aspects of your personality, all of these aspects of your experiences, so that you make the best physician that you can be. And certainly in this time of COVID-19, it's going to be important for schools to try and see who are the people that are going to be most able to manage under the stress of pandemics, under the stress of, natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes. I mean, these are things that are coming up more and more in our society across the world. And schools are looking for people who are going to be able to manage that successfully. And how do you fulfill the purpose of and tell them how you want to be in medical school? Well, you have to give them a story. You have to tell them a story about yourself. You want to talk about, are you the oldest? Are you the youngest? Are you a first generation American? And how has your place in your family and your community in the general society, how's that defined your life? Are you stronger, faster, able to solve problems? Can you show that you are willing and able to overcome obstacles? How tenacious are you when you face a problem? Are you able to overcome it? Are you able to get past it? What do your career plans include? Are you interested in clean energy? Do you want to work in healthcare administration? Why are these things important to you? Where do you want to have an impact? In an urban setting, a rural setting? Do you want to take on national healthcare issues? You want to talk about what you think about your future, not just as a physician, but as a person, because as a physician, you will still be a person. You will still be somebody who will have outside interest, who will have political leanings, who will have an interest in doing things outside of their workday. You may still want to climb rocks as you get older, hopefully not after the age of 50, because we start to break bones. But you want to be able, they want to see that you're going to be someone who wants to develop your whole self, not just your professional self. Okay. How do you demonstrate when your interest in healthcare developed? You don't want to talk about, when I was a kid, I got my first doctor's kit and I knew then that I wanted to be a doctor. That's cute. That's a lovely story to tell maybe your soon-to-be spouse, but it's not the story you want to tell a committee. The story you want to tell a committee is how you decided on healthcare as an adult. And when we say an adult, I'd say anywhere from the age of 16 and up. You went into volunteering in a hospital when you were 16, or you started working as an EMT, or someone in your family had an illness, and in seeing the doctors and the nurses work with them every day, you developed an interest and a passion for healthcare yourself. That's the kind of thing that you want to talk about. Okay. How have you demonstrated that interest? What have you done to show that you want to do this? Again, are you working in a hospital? Obviously, with COVID-19, very few of you may have had an opportunity in the spring and this summer to do that, but hopefully we'll get back to normal and you'll be able to do that. Okay. What makes you unique? How far out of your comfort zone have you traveled? Where are you in terms of the kinds of books that you've read? What are you going to tell them about your personal values? Are you always the peacemaker in your family? Were you always a quiet person? Are you a good listener? Do you have excess energy? Those are things that tell them about who you are and what makes you unique. Each of us is unique. So after we look at those things, why don't we talk a little bit about what a personal statement actually is? It's about you. It's not about your parents. It's not a quote from Gandhi or from Martin Luther. It's a opportunity for you to really, maybe for the first time, spotlight you as a person, you as a professional, you as a student. This is an opportunity for you to have everything looking at you, and that's what you want to do. You want to keep in front of you the idea that the focus is only on you. It's not a 2-paragraph or 3 paragraphs about shadowing a fantastic physician and how fantastically this doctor worked with patients and how much you enjoyed watching them, and therefore this is what you want to do with your life. No, it's a story about how you observed someone else. You then imitated that behavior as you worked in various areas that you were interested in, where you went to work with disadvantaged kids, or you worked with the elderly, or you worked with developmentally disabled adults. These are the things that you want to talk about, but it always has to point towards you. Keep this picture of a spotlight on you, and you can't go wrong. You want to prove to the school that you've earned a seat in their class, okay? What are the details? I'm an EMT. Well, telling me that you're an EMT doesn't give me any details. Were you a good EMT? Did you take care of patients well? Were you efficient? Were you able to dive into an emergency and keep a cool head? What about some of the stories about patients and their families that you were able to help? Give examples. Make sure that everything that you say has an example to back it up. It's not a good story unless you actually have samples, okay? You have to show them that you really have a deep and abiding interest in making this your career choice. It's not an easy path, it's a difficult path, and schools want to know that you're going to be in it for the long haul. So it's important that you make proof and make sure that they are comfortable with that proof, okay? You want to write in conversational tones, okay? You don't want to use big words. You also do not want to use a lot of slang. I had a student who every paragraph was like, oh boy, I was so excited. Your prose should be professional. It doesn't have to be stiff. It doesn't have to be something that's not unique to you. It should sound like your voice. Someone should read your essay, and when they see you in person, they should say that essay matches the personality of this person. But using big words that you don't understand or that you use inappropriately will only embarrass you, and it will embarrass the interviewer if you get that far, because you may not get that far, because if people see that you're not using language appropriately, then they're going to know that you're just using it because you're trying to build yourself up into something that you're not, okay? That is something that you want to watch. And then tell the story. Just tell a story about what happened. First of all, when you write your personal statement, I don't want you to keep it to 5,300 characters. You want it to be as long as it needs to be, and then you start cutting things down. Make a really good long essay that you can then work on and say, okay, this is important, but maybe this is not important. Those are the ways that you start to think about how to write your statement. You want to talk about what you learned and what you got out of it, okay? I was a medical assistant for a doctor's office for 2 years. Again, I took blood pressure, I took temperatures, and I took patient histories. But what did you get out of that? What did you learn from that? How did that help you develop skills that will make patients comfortable when they come to you as a physician? Okay. You also want to make sure that that you get across the idea that you are diligent, you're hardworking, you're ambitious, you're compassionate, and walk the committee through that process, how you've developed those skills, how you've become a more mature person as you've gotten older. It's okay to start from being very young, making mistakes, but you want to talk about that journey. How did it get you there? Because that's the interesting piece. That's the piece that makes you unique. No one else has walked in your shoes. Now, let's get to what a personal statement is not. It's not Shakespeare. We're not writing poetry. You're not Tom Clancy. We're not writing a mystery novel. You are looking to be as professional and as polished as possible. You want to also not make it a reiteration of your resume. They already have a resume. It's called your experiences. You are not going to write out your resume in sentence form and turn that in and say that's a personal statement. That doesn't give the committee any more information about you than they can get from the rest of your application. This one piece of writing should stand alone. That doesn't mean you can't mention your experiences in the essay, but you do want to mention them again, not in terms of what you did, but in terms of how it changed you, how you learned from it, okay? You don't want to make obscure quotes. As I said, this is prime real estate. If you think about it that way, and you think about how much it costs per square inch to have a fancy house on Monopoly, have one of the, and have to pay that big luxury tax, then you want to know that your essay is making as much use of those 5,300 characters as possible, okay? You don't want to talk about or make assumptions about things that you really don't know about. I don't know about your parents, but certainly my parents and we have conversations when my kids listen to us, they hear what we're saying, but they don't have that experience. Write about what you know, not about what you think, not about what your parents think. You don't have the education or the expertise, for instance, to talk about how the United States has managed COVID-19. Unless you are an EMT or you already have a master's in public health, you already serve as a nurse or you've been a medic in the service, you don't really have, most of you probably don't have enough experience to talk about that issue. So don't try. It's not something that schools require of you. They're not asking that of you. They may like to know what you thought about the pandemic from your point of view, how your community handled it, how it affected your family. But you, again, only from what you know, not about what you're thinking, okay? And then there are things you want to avoid. There are words that you just don't, there's no room for them because, again, we're thinking about prime real estate. Phrases such as I think, I feel, I hope, it seems, talk about opinions are not really what they want. Opinions may be something that you want to talk about in an interview, but again, opinions have to be backed up with the idea that you have some fact or you have some experience that would allow you to have those opinions. Spouting about things you don't know is not going to do anything for you. Try to avoid the passive tense, okay? Passive tense. At dinner, 6 shrimp were eaten by Harry. Active tense. Harry ate 6 shrimp at dinner. You want to be active in your language, first of all, because it's more efficient. As you can see, it takes more time and often more words to be passive, but you also want your language to be more interesting. So you want the reader to find it interesting to keep reading. You don't want the reader to get to the second paragraph and say, this is boring, I'm not going to read this any further. That would be the end of your potential interview possibilities at that school if that happens. You want to avoid adjectives like exciting, interesting, fascinating. As lovely as those words are, again, prime real estate, we want to make this concise so that schools can get the most out of your words. And by using a lot of different adjectives, often you will waste space that you could be using for something else. Don't use empty phrases. You want to use clear examples to support what you write. You don't want it to be bland, but you do want every sentence to convey an idea about who, an idea about you. That's what's going to be important. And of course, we want to avoid insulting people. So you don't want to write a statement that says something about today's doctors seem incapable of empathizing with patients. Now, maybe your parents have had a bad experience, or maybe you've had a bad experience, but your essay is not the place to openly discuss your disdain of certain practices that some physicians have. Again, you're not in their, if you're not walking in their shoes, you really don't have a leg to stand on in terms of critiquing. Same thing with faculty. You don't want to talk about your professors. You don't want to talk about your undergraduate school and how competitive it was. That doesn't get you any place. And again, it doesn't talk about you. It talks about something other than you. It takes that spotlight off of you and puts it somewhere else. Keep the spotlight on yourself. Don't oversell yourself in a research project. Don't exaggerate. There are two reasons for that. One is you probably assume, well, the school's never going to know whether or not I did more or less in a research project. It's not necessarily true. If you had a research mentor who wrote a letter for you, or a faculty member who you did a little bit of research with and you exaggerated how much you did, their letter might indicate the difference between how you're presenting yourself and how they saw the actual event. So don't exaggerate. It's not necessary. You also, sometimes I've had students come back and say they really grilled me on how well I knew my research project. And I can only talk about my part. I didn't know about anybody else's part in the lab. Well, again, that's an exaggeration then, because if you were truly involved to the point where you were doing something that was critical to the lab, then you would have a better idea of how the overall project was functioning and not just your small role in it. So don't exaggerate. If you did a small part, then just talk about the small part. Schools are not going to reject you because you didn't have a big research project and your name wasn't on a paper. They are more interested in whether or not you are honest and forthright, and if you are self-aware enough to see what your contributions have been and what your contributions have not been. And that's okay. That's fine. Okay. So I'm almost at the end. Thank you so much for hanging with me so far. I know that this is a lot. But here's what we want to think about. A personal statement demonstrates your communication skills. If you can't write about yourself, you won't be able to verbally articulate who you are either, which means in an interview, you're going to fall on your face. And that means you also will demonstrate that you really don't have maybe the ability to connect with patients, which is ultimately what every medical school wants to train you to be, of someone who can work well with patients of all kinds of sizes and shapes, colors and creeds. They want you to be able to function with anyone. And so if you can't talk about yourself well, then they really worry that you're not going to be able to make those connections with other people, not just patients, but your colleagues or your classmates. So here's some of the things that I want you to think about before you start the draft of your personal statement. And if you've already started it, that doesn't mean you have to go back to square one. It's just these are some things that you want to think about. What are you passionate about? I mean, really passionate about. If you're passionate about Grand theft auto, that's perfectly fine. However, you want to talk about how being passionate about grand theft auto will ultimately make you a better doctor. Will it mean that you'll be a better ambulance driver? Does it mean that you will be able to fix the people who get bounced around when they get hit by a car in grand theft auto? Whatever it is, what are you passionate about? It doesn't have to sound frivolous. It just has to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense in terms of your career as a doctor, then how does it fit into your overall lifestyle? Grand auto theft might be something that helps you relax. And being relaxed means that you get a chance to take a breath, that your stress levels can go down. That's perfectly fine. How and when did you develop your interest? What made you decide to have a particular interest? If you play the piano, why? Why the piano? Why not the flute? If you play multiple instruments, why several instruments? How do you connect your interest in music to your ability to be a good science person, right? If you're a musician, obviously, and you play an instrument, or you're a singer, or you're someone who does theater, then you are someone who has to think about memorization. You have to think about pattern recognition. These are skills that are transferable to what? To your studies. And that's what you want to talk about. What mistakes have you made and how have you learned from them? I don't want you to necessarily talk about your multiple DUIs. I think there are other places in the application that you might want to address if something that serious has happened. But we've all made mistakes. We're humans. We are not perfect. So what did you learn from those mistakes? How did you correct those mistakes? And how have you been able to help anybody else who are in trouble or making the same kinds of mistakes? It's okay to address things that you've done wrong that you think you've fixed and made you a better person. What ideas, books, courses, or events have influenced the way you see the world? What do you like to read? Wall Street Journal. Are you interested in Vogue magazine? You like fashion? Perfectly fine. How do you see the world? Has COVID-19 changed the way you see the world? Has other recent events in our country changed the way you see things? I would stay away from controversial issues because I think those are things that get us all in trouble. Everyone has their own personal opinion about what kinds of things are going right or wrong in the world, but you certainly do want to give schools a sense that you have an idea of how you fit in the world, and you do have an idea of how you would like to see the world shaping if you were there to influence it in some way. How do your current activities reflect your values? Again, Grand Theft Auto is fine. We're all going to assume that just because you like that game doesn't mean that you want to steal cars for a living. But what does it reflect about you? And of course,
a little trouble here.
It's okay.
You can keep going. I'll eventually get it.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. We're trying to do this. Two people trying to do it. And so can you link your interest to your goals to be a clinician? How does that help you? What is it that we want to tell them about who you see yourself being in the future? And those are the things that you really want to do. And finally, remember that everything in your personal statement and the rest of your application is subject to discussion at the interview. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to get that personal statement so that down the road, the interview takes place. Okay, I'm going to finish there. And I am going to let Linda close, and then we will be ready to take some questions.
Right.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Lolita. And you can, I've already started, questions started coming in. They look like excellent questions. I don't know why the slides for some reason are not working at this point. But Lolita, we had also talked that we would put on the video so they could see us.
Yes.
And I think we'll do that. There we go. It's all right. Now it's starting to work. And we can do that too. So I'll start my video. So you can see my smiling face. Hello, everybody. Hi, Lolita. Okay.
Hi.
All right, great. Before we move into the Q&A and the last part of the presentation, I want to ask you what you found most valuable in Lolita's outstanding presentation. If you could pose that in the chat window, what you found most valuable. Okay. That would go in the chat window. If you've worked with a well-known scientist, physician, famous patient, you should mention that person by name in the personal statement. Okay, Visar, what else? Anybody else want to share? It was a great presentation. What did you find most valuable, insightful, useful to you? Anybody else want to share? How about the fact that the essay should be focused on you and not about you getting a doctor kit when you were a child? Anybody like that? Talking beyond just your experiences, but what you gained from them. Excellent. How you can make your passions and personalities stand out in the statement, that the audience is older and experienced professionals. Taking the GTA examples with interest because it shows that any experience is valuable. Not quite sure what GTA is, but I'll take your word that it was covered. Your hobbies can influence how you become a physician. True. These are great comments. Breakdown of questions we should ask ourselves before writing. Providing demonstrations of the work you've done and how it influenced you. Avoid adjectives, or at least too many. The Grand Theft Auto video game. That's a great one. Okay, good. This is wonderful feedback. Thank you. And thank you, Lolita, for the wonderful webinar. Thank you, attendees, for your questions, your answers, and for carving out time to attend this evening. And we are going to get to your questions. So again, if you have questions, please post them in the question window. As Lolita said, the goal in your writing your personal statement is to introduce yourself to the admissions committee as a real human being, an individual, and to help them go beyond the transcript and test score, the short nuggets, and get to know the true you, an individual, a human being, motivated to become a physician with hopes and dreams, skills, strengths, and lots of competition for every single spot. Your goal in applying to medical school is to apply confidently and successfully to the best programs for you. Now, the goal of the personal statement is to get an interview. That's true, but the whole process is about, again, a certain degree of confidence, I think, sanity, lack of stress, and of course, success. Lolita has given you tons of great advice. She's told you what your essay should and should not be. She's given you do's and don'ts and avoids that apply to all of you. But no one, not even Lolita Woodhill, with all her experience, can teach you how to apply these excellent suggestions to your particular situation, or give you additional advice that applies only to your situation, unless she works one-on-one with you. To get that kind of support, you need the know-how supplied by experts, applying general information to you as an individual. In other words, you need consulting. You are now at a crossroads. You can obtain one-on-one individual guidance for your critical personal statement or the other elements of your medical school application. Or you can continue along and do it yourself. But realize that we here at Accepted are here to help you optimize your application, reduce your stress, and save time. Lolita, the other medical school admissions consultants at Accepted, and I have mentored hundreds, if not thousands, of medical school applicants through the writing required at the medical school application process, the personal statement, the most meaningful experiences, the activity descriptions, the secondaries, and of course, the interview. Given the complexity of the application process and the stakes, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out, and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. Access a level of experience you really don't want to have, because we've been through this hundreds or thousands of times. This process takes a lot of time you simply don't have. We can help you save time. You don't need to be a bundle of nerves and stress. Apply knowing you have an expert to turn to and to mentor you. Improve your chances of acceptance. Last year, 91% of our clients were accepted to medical school. We have the admissions experts who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. former admissions directors, staff members, post-bac program directors, pre-health advisors, and published authors. They can be your guide through this stressful, time-consuming process. Here's what you should do. Visit www.accepted.com/medessay. Choose a service that's right for you. Get the guidance you need for a successful med school application. Go from confusion to clarity and from doubts to confidence. Now, some of you may say, isn't accepted expensive? Well, so is rejected. So is rejection. But, I'm having this problem again. But the cost of reapplication, the cost of rejection can be far higher than the cost of accepted. The cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s just in application fees. And I'm not even talking about your MCAT if you have to retake that. You have a year of earnings at a much lower level before med school than you have after med school. And if you get in a year later, you have that lower level of earnings for a year longer. There's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program, however you define that, perhaps with greater lifetime opportunities and, yes, even earnings. Now, every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and frankly, so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Well, here's a couple of samples. Great news. I've been accepted at ABC College of Medicine, my first choice. I want to thank you very much for all the help you provided through the admissions process, from personal statement to helping me plan gap years. Nothing would have been possible without your invaluable advice. I will be forever grateful. Or this one. Hello, Alita. I got accepted to Temple with a scholarship. I don't want to reveal how much. I've just submitted my deposit and will be attending there starting next fall. I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done and the invaluable guidance that you've provided. I honestly couldn't have gotten an acceptance without your help, much less a scholarship. That's my addition. Thank you so much again, and I'll keep you posted. Okay, and that was received September 26th of this year. Now, we'd love to help you as we've helped these clients and thousands of others over the last 20 years. So once again, here are the steps I recommend you take after the webinar. Visit accepted.com/medessay. Choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and then apply confidently and successfully. And now it's time for the Q&A. Okay. Let's see, we have some great questions here. Lolita, you ready?
Mm-hmm. I sure am.
Okay. If you've not had any interactions with in a clinical setting or serving underserved communities such as disabled or nursing homes, how do you still make the audience interested?
Well, one of the things I would say is there are other ways that you can serve people. You might be someone who watches your grandparent in the afternoon because they're disabled. Perhaps you serve in your synagogue or in your church as a youth leader. Maybe you've been working at a camp for many years. These are things that you can talk about. It doesn't make up for the lack of clinical experience, but schools ultimately want to see that you have the willingness and the heart and the desire to be of service to other people. Whether or not those are, you've been babysitting for, twins next door for the past 5 years, or, you wash the dishes for your mother every night. These are things that schools want to know about. You have chores. You have responsibilities within the home and outside of the home. Talk about any of those things. I think that's going to be important, and that'll make an interesting story.
Okay, great. Here's another one. Thank you for that question. That's from an anonymous attendee. Now, some people are here, and if you are here with a name, I would I might ask you if I can unmute you and you can actually speak your question. But anyway, here we go. Another anonymous attendee. Is there such a thing as being too personal in the statement? Is talking about losing a loved one in your statement considered taboo?
That is not taboo. However, I would frame it in such a way that that this is an experience that you went through and that you've gotten through, that you've learned from it. The pain is not going to go away, but it's not pain that's debilitating. Certainly, you don't want to talk about something personal that you are not able to talk about without crying, without being visibly upset or shaken. So some experiences are just too new. And I'll give you an example. My aunt died last year, and a week after she died, I went to a medical school to visit, and they took us into a simulation hospital room with one of those simulation dummies. And the room was set up exactly like her room was, as we took her off life support. And I broke down and I had to leave the room. And I was shocked because I thought, okay, I'm a grown up. I could do this. It was too soon. So be very sure that if you're going to do something very personal, that it's something that you are going to be able to manage to talk about in an interview, because it will be brought up. So I think Accepted does a good job of helping people figure out what they can manage to talk about personally in that journey and what you learned from it and how you grew stronger from it. But it also could be a disaster if it's something that you really haven't been able to get past yet. And it's okay to not be able to get past something. It's just, if that's the case, and that's something I would not want to put a spotlight on.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. Okay, here's another great question. Do you recommend briefly addressing red flags in the personal statement?
Red flags. Red flags are a lot of
I would say it's probably like a dip in GPA or a low MCAT or something like that.
Yes, a low GPA is not necessarily a red flag unless it's a low GPA and you haven't been able to raise it. So if you're applying with a low GPA, that's going to be a red flag just because the transcript is going to indicate that. But red flags are all your sentences start with I. I did this, I did that, I observed this, I learned this. This is how I responded. So I sentences are things that many medical schools, they circle how many I's you have in the essay. So that's a red flag. Another red flag might be, again, that you talk about something that is clearly so painful that you've not been able to let go yet, okay? That doesn't mean that you don't want to address it, but it is a red flag if they feel that you are unable to rein in your emotions enough that you can talk about it without being emotional. Because, as a doctor, you're going to have patients who are going to be dying. You're going to have patients that you love and adore, and they're not going to get better. And so schools need to know that you're going to be able to manage that. Other red flags would be, statements that clearly you don't have the expertise to deal with. I had a student who talked about he would never advise a patient who wanted an abortion. Well, okay. That's something you discuss on the other end after you've gotten your medical license and you decide to take that step, which is fine. That's your personal choice and that's cool. But to talk about it in the essay, he really got a lot of negative reactions to his strong belief that this was something that he could not do. We want to believe that we are people who are open-minded and open to other people's points of view. So that would also be a red flag if you really have something really indicating that you are closed-minded and unable to kind of see other points of view.
Okay, here we have a question from Geeta, I guess going back to your Venn diagram. Can you give an example of an opportunity and how we would find the intersection between interest, opportunity, and skill?
Well, you play the piano and you decide that you'd like to start a club at school that addresses people who want to play instruments. They just want to run concerts out in the park. Or you want to start a band, you want to start an orchestra. You are someone who plays Frisbee, and so you start an ultimate Frisbee league. So that's a skill set, and you make an opportunity out of it. or you like to cook, so you decide that you're going to do bake sales to raise money for your sorority or your fraternity. These are skills and opportunities, right? And it shows that you have an idea and you know how to actually manifest that idea and make it turn into something. So I think that's the best way I can answer that.
Okay. She says thank you. All right. Let's see. Visar, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. Can I unmute you for a second? I am going to unmute you. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to, but you are allowed to talk if you're willing to. Okay, so you have a question here. Go ahead.
Yes. So my question is, if in your experiences you've worked with a well-known physician and or a well-known patient, and I can mention examples, if I'm allowed to.
Patients know, because that would mean that you're talking about someone, there's confidentiality there that a patient can assume that you would not use their name so that you could impress someone. And a famous person, a doctor, a researcher, I'm not so sure I see the value of mentioning them unless it's to mention them, just their name, and say, I worked with Dr. So-and-so, and this is what I got from working with someone who was famous and had lots of things going on, and I learned how to manage my time better, and I learned how to orchestrate, talks, and to be someone that people would look up to. So throwing around names, I think for the most part, usually does not work in your favor. That's a personal opinion. If that person is someone who's writing a letter for you, it might be the better use to make sure that that letter is written rather than you put their name in your personal statement.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lolita. These are great answers, great questions, great answers. So thank you to everybody. Here we have another anonymous attendee who I think on the phone. And the question is, if you are an older applicant and have many medical clinical experiences to share, how do you know which to pinpoint and elaborate on, and how can you make sure you don't repeat yourself in the activities section?
Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to put all those experiences together and see if you can group them. Okay, so can you group some experiences as more clinically driven, some are more research driven, some are more where you're learning, or some are more where you're teaching. So try and group them that way. And then I would also think about doing it chronologically so that they see that you've moved up in position. So maybe you went from being a medical assistant to being an LPN, maybe then you got your nursing license, and then you went back to school because now you want to be a doctor. That's perfectly fine. Or maybe you were a dental hygienist or a farm tech, and then you became an EMT, and now you're going to apply to medical school. Again, trying to group them so that the skills that you have and the experiences that you had and how you manage them, if you group them that way, you might find that there's a lot of commonality between them. And those common things are what you want to talk about for all of them. And then what makes each of them unique, you can parcel out and kind of pull out a little bit. Does that help?
Hope so. Does it help? Anonymous, I don't know if he's on the phone, he can't even chat an answer, or she. So,
okay.
But we have some other good ones here. How do you avoid saying "I" too much?
That is
a good question.
A good question, and it's not easy to do. What you often want to do is put the sentence in put it in an I sentence format, and then see if you can turn it around. I am someone who likes to go for long bike rides. as a bike rider, it's been important to my health and well-being to make those distances longer and longer.
Another way is to turn a clause into an adjective phrase. And by that, I mean, you could say, I went to the store and then I went for a bike ride. Or you could say, after going to the store, the bike called my name. That's a little exaggerated, but even if you said after going to the store, I went for a bike ride, it's a very simple way to cut in half your I's.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously there are going to be some sentences where you can't avoid it, but just pay attention to it. You don't want every sentence to start with I, first of all, because it's also boring to the reader. So you want to change up how you start a sentence. And I can't start every sentence. That gets very tedious very quickly.
Right. So I think the point here is not to eliminate I's from the essay at all, because obviously, as Lita said before, the focus of the essay should be you, which when you write the essay will mean it's going to be I. You're going to be the subject, but it's just something to be aware of and try and minimize when possible. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Another question. Should I mention that I'm a reapplicant in the essay, or just write a standard essay without mentioning what I've improved, what's different about my application, etc.?
Well, I don't think it's necessary for you to talk about what you've improved. I think it's important for you to talk about the journey that you took the first time and how the second time that journey has changed how you saw yourself the first time, right? So you want to talk about growth. You want to talk about your ability to make changes, and you want to talk about your ability to stick with the idea that this is important enough for you to try it again.
Okay, great. And then we have one question here from Paige. I graduated in 2015 from college and have been working as a dental hygienist for the last year and a half. My path has taken many twists and turns, but each step closer to my dream of practicing medicine. If my letter addresses the progression of this transition from marketing to working on a fishing boat in Alaska to dental hygiene to medical school admissions, do you feel it can be a captivating letter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a journey that is so unique. And you can, again, you want to highlight the idea that you had an idea in your head of where you wanted to go. You tried as hard as you could to either take a certain path to get there, or that you started with a different path and the path led you to where you are going now. So either way is acceptable, but I think it's a great story and something that if you tell it well, schools will find very compelling.
Right. I think the only caution I would have for you, Paige, is that you don't want it to be, I did this, then I did that, then I did this, then I did that. There has to be, as Alita emphasized before, there has to be a story there. Mm-hmm. And there has to be some lessons learned from at least some of the experiences that you had. And maybe even how some of those experiences will make you a better doctor. Okay, I'm not quite sure how the fishing boat would make you a better doctor, but perhaps relating to people from different socioeconomic groups. Mm-hmm. That might be the story there. So, mm-hmm. I think the devil is in the details in how you tell that story, but certainly the skeleton of it sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I now want to thank you, Lolita, and attendees for your time, your attention, especially attendees for your questions, and Lolita for your answers. I'd like to share a final thought and story and a final question from me to you. Lolita has provided you with tons of insightful advice for your medical school personal statement, but keep in mind the goal here, telling your story, your journey to medicine, while highlighting your strengths and your ability to be a skilled, compassionate physician. How can you do it? Well, here is how an accepted consultant helped one of our clients, let's call him Larry, in the consultant's words. Larry came to Accepted after getting rejected the first time around. He'd gotten 2 interviews the first time, but no acceptances. While he had some undergraduate struggles, he had done well on the MCAT. In his essays, he needed to explain why he had taken a year off during undergrad to improve his grades and transferred. He also needed to present his past experience in a compelling way to an admissions committee. Let's see what's going on here. We focused on Larry's interest in the people he had worked with and taught, emphasizing the importance of communications and listening. Larry has also started his own nonprofit, which helped to show his continuing interest in the communities where he had worked. We also worked on interview skills, ensuring that Larry listened to the questions being asked rather than responding hastily. In the end, Larry received his first medical school acceptance by November and ended up the cycle with multiple acceptances. He was able to choose between several programs that were a good fit for his interests. Now, Larry received his first medical acceptance late November, and he wrote me at that point, "My consultant was such a reliable and invaluable resource to me throughout the application process. Her feedback was strong, insightful, and remarkably clear. Thanks to her help, I presented a sincere and compelling narrative that was pivotal to my success this year. While she is an exceptionally talented editor, what stood out to me most was her demonstration of compassion and genuine care for me as a person. I always felt like I was her only client. Thankfully, I do not have to go through the application process again. But if I did, I would 100% work with her again." Now, Larry received the support he needed. He has started medical school. Imagine being in his shoes and getting that coveted acceptance, attending your white coat ceremony, and yes, walking the halls with a stethoscope slung around your neck. Larry, once upon a time, had challenges to overcome and an MCAS to fill out. He had a personal statement to write. He did it. So can you. Get accepted. Now, that was the story. Where's the question? My question for you is, you've listened to Lolita's excellent presentation. You've listened to my pitch. You've participated in the Q&A. And again, thanks for your great questions. You're obviously interested in what we have to say. So what's causing you to hesitate about engaging with Accepted and getting the one-on-one guidance you deserve for your personal statement? In the chat window, please, if you could post your responses to that question, I really, really appreciate it. Okay, let's see. What's coming in? You're very welcome, Paige. Okay, what's coming in? Price, financial reasons, the price. Okay. When you submit an application and a secondary, you are going to spend about $125 to $150 per application. Our minimum fee is $330. Now, one of the slides I was having trouble with actually had that fee on it, what our prices are. But you can obviously, there's the prices, right? The minimum is $330. The primary application package is $26.15. Primary plus secondary is obviously more. If you are rejected, your costs are going to be much higher than anybody ever paid Accepted. That's number one. Number two, our clients sometimes credit us with helping them get scholarships. They're concerned that, are there any discounts? Sometimes there are discounts. I don't think we have one going on right now. We don't have one going on right now because we're really busy right now. But there are other costs involved. And you have to count those up and weigh those also. Again, I mentioned during the presentation that if you are accepted this year and start medical school a year earlier, you're going to make in 5 figures more because you got accepted a year earlier and got started a year earlier. That's, our fees are peanuts compared to that payoff. Now,
Can I also say that one of the
Sure.
things that Accepted does really nicely is allows you to break these payments up. So there are ways to minimize how much you have to lay out initially. You can pay it over 6 months with no interest through PayPal.
that's right.
So there are ways that you can do this. I also want you to think about it in terms of if you apply and get rejected, you now have to take the time away from probably working and earning money so that you can retake the MCAT, so you can take the time to redo your personal statement. So you're losing income every time that you have to reapply, not to mention the stress and the aggravation of having to do that. So I think you need to keep that in mind. Obviously, if it's not affordable for you, then that's something that you have to consider. But you also need to reach out to family and friends and say, this is important to me. Can you help me manage this?
Excellent point. Both points are excellent. And we also have flexible different options. You can purchase hourly, where you control very much where time is spent and obviously your money. There are discounts built into our pricing structure, both for larger purchases of hours or our package plans are heavily discounted. So those discounts are definitely built into the pricing. Check it out. You know where to go. It's accepted.com/medessay, and you can just look at it, look at the services there. We also do offer a free initial call, and Lolita is happy to talk to you and see if she can't help you. $330, which is our minimum fee, let's say to review your essay, you know, that can make a big, big, big difference. If you want it edited, it's probably a little bit more than that, but you can start out with some fairly reasonable amounts given what you're going to spend on the medical application process, not to mention the medical education. So any other feedback on why you're not engaging with us yet? But thank you very much for your responses. I really appreciate it. Then I'm going to thank you very much again for your presentation. Encourage you to check out accept.com/medessay and wish you best of luck on your application process. You're most welcome.
You're most welcome.
Yes, you're very, very welcome. Good luck. Good luck to all of you.